You're watching Medfield TV, Community Shows.
Today we're talking about Alexander Hamilton. And much like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton is in our wallet, isn't he? He's in our wallet. He's not in our hearts. And part of the reason for that, we'll remember where to put this, part of the reason for that is that he and Thomas Jefferson and he and John Adams so disliked one another. And with Hamilton's death at the age of 48, gunned down by Aaron Burr, that Jefferson and Adams lived long enough to really bury the reputation of Alexander Hamilton. And for John Adams, Alexander Hamilton was always the bastard brat of a Scottish peddler. Now, that's personal, isn't it? I mean, there's John Adams. Let me say it again. The bastard brat of a Scottish peddler. And in part, that was right. I mean, he was a bastard. And by that I mean he was born out of wedlock. And Rachel, Rachel, his mother, I'll be kind here. Rachel was a woman of easy virtue. All right, I'll be kind. And pretty much, like a Dickens character, that Alexander Hamilton was on his own by the age of 11 or 12. But he was brilliant. He was brilliant, he was resourceful, and of all the founders, he came from the farthest back in the pack. He had no money, he had no land, he had no leverage. He had sponsors later on, but he came from the farthest back in the pack. And for Alexander Hamilton today, this afternoon, he would not want to be on Mount Rushmore, not at all. He is quite content to be on the $10 bill. And he's dashing and handsome on that $10 bill, isn't he? With that painting and that, the ascot and looking off into the distance, that he is a good-looking dude. And he was a good-looking man. And he was, and I know he would appreciate this, me remarking on this, that he was catnip to women. All right, he was a good-looking man. And he played that hand as often as he could. And many of them did, as you well know. So Alexander Hamilton came to the attention. He was born in the Indies. He was born on the island of Nevis, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And at the age of 12, he came to the attention of a group of businessmen, merchants. I mean, the cockpit of the Atlantic economy was the Caribbean, with fish and molasses and timber and slaves and so forth, moving through the Caribbean. And Alexander Hamilton was gifted with a brilliant mind, and he had the ability to, right off the top of his head, to deal with all that hodgepodge of coin, that was moving through the Caribbean. The value of a Portuguese money, French, if you will, the British pound, and how and Spanish currency and Portuguese currency, and how the British sterling matched up against these, and how to do business. And the men who had hired him were just amazed at his accounting ability, and his ability to keep all these numbers in his head and make them money, good money, at the age of 14 and 15, to the point that they would return home to Britain, to London for the holidays, and leave the business in the very capable, competent hands of Alexander Hamilton. He was brilliant. And what they wanted to do for him, and this is when he left Nevis forever and got caught up in the American Revolution, they wanted to gift him with tuition. They wanted to gift him with a college education. That way you're certifiable. That way you've got a document. That way it makes you credible. At least you've got those initials after your name. And young Alex was a man in a hurry. And off he went to New York, where the revolution was where Tory sentiment and patriot sentiment really clashed. And off he went to New York, a man in a hurry, and the dean at Princeton, whomever that might be. And he said, I'd like to attend Princeton. And said, well, you need to take this requirement, and this requirement, and this requirement, and this requirement. And Hamilton said, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to take all these prerequisites. I want to be able to learn on my own. I can do this in a year. Well, sir, you cannot do this in a year. You can't do this, And Hamilton said, well, very well, I'll go off to Columbia. It was King's College back then. And he went off to Columbia, and he laid the same pattern. Now, I can get this all done in a year and a half and 2 years. And he did. But in the middle of that, in the midst of that, the American Revolution, began to simmer. And then it exploded, didn't it, in 1775, 1776. And Hamilton got caught up with, as a young man, got caught up with the excitement of the American Revolution. What a time to be alive. What a time to make a contribution. And young men make the best revolutionaries. And that's why Benjamin Franklin makes no sense at all. I mean, he was the oldest guy there. He was always the oldest man at the table. And his son remained a loyalist, didn't he? And that divided father from son. And here's old Ben Franklin, the revolutionary. And Hamilton got caught up in it. And Hamilton, the abilities of Hamilton were brought to the attention of George Washington. He said, this is the guy you want to hire. This is the guy you want to recruit to do your money, to keep the finances straight, to keep the ordering straight. And Washington brought in Hamilton as his primary aide, as his chief of staff at the tender age of 22. This is chief of staff. And Washington not only was taken by his financial abilities and to remember and to calculate and to conclude and so forth. Every once in a while you meet someone who has the mind, they can break a problem down so easily into its component parts and say, don't you see it? You link this up with this and everything happens. And every once in a while you meet people like that. And then you meet people who cannot get out of their way. Right? They worry about everything. Right? They get up worrying whether or not the sun is going to supernova this morning. Well, if it does, it's not going to matter. You're going to be very dead and fried. So we all know people like that, don't we? Who have made a career out of worrying. Don't worry until it happens. And then deal with it. And then ignore it. Hamilton, brilliant. And another quality that Hamilton had that drew him into Washington is that when the French became our ally, Hamilton was very conversant in speaking French, in writing French, in translating French. Washington was none of those things. And Hamilton served the moneyed interests, the organizational interests, and the interests of our new ally, which helped swing the American Revolution in our favor, didn't it? As we all know, as Washington admitted years later after the Revolution, the fact that we pulled this off at all was a standing miracle. That's his phrase, not mine. A standing miracle. We had no business winning this thing. Thank you, friends. And so when the war was, during the war, Hamilton spent some time, we need to back this in as well. I need to leverage this in. During the war, Hamilton spent time not only in the field, but he was at Valley Forge. And at Valley Forge, he very quickly came to understand how poisonous the power of the states could be. That we have to limit, we need to curtail the power of the states. And that's going to be part of his position at Philadelphia, the writing of the Constitution. The states have too much power. The people get into mischief. We cannot allow the people to question things. They don't know what they're doing. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry thinks they have the right answer. They don't. I do. Listen to me. I know what's best. Hamilton. You ready for this? This is why he's not on Mount Rushmore. Hamilton Democracy is a poison. Democracy is a disease. I'm quoting him here. People have no idea what they're doing. They will sell their vote to the person who sells them the most. It's all about merit. It's all about meritocracy. Show me what you've done. Don't show me your resume. What have you done? What have you accomplished? He's about the bottom line. You know, the IPO, the stock dividend. What's the exchange rate? I mean, that's Alexander Hamilton. A nation has permanent interests, not permanent allies. And when we're done with them, cast them aside. Particularly the French, because at the end of the Revolution, Hamilton so much wanted to get back on good terms with the British and get involved in that British global economy, the strength of which he had seen as working the numbers in the West Indies. We need to get back on good terms with Britain. The French got out of it what they wanted, a weakened British Empire. In other words, the 13 North American colonies are now the United States of America. They got what they wanted. They used us, we used them. And now we need to get back on good terms with Great Britain. Democracy is a disease. It's catchy. And with the events of Shays' Rebellion, not too far from here, you know, where these farmers, you know, rose up again rather than paying taxes, you know, to the, or their mortgage payments. We can't have that. We can't have that. You signed a contract. And if you renege on it, then we seize your property. What are you talking about, that you rebel and close down the courts and then try to seize the weapons at Springfield Army? Who are you? You're nobody. Hamilton. But in saying all of that, very gracious, very polite, dressed beautifully, absolutely dressed beautifully. Look at that $10 bill. So the next time you part with a $10 bill, I know you. I know you, and you'll really know him when you're done. In fact, you may not part with that 10. You may want to keep it for another souvenir, you know, and use Jackson off the 20. All right? Who may be off the 20 at some point, but not as long as Donald Trump is president. You know that. That's his hero, Andrew Jackson. It was Barack Obama who was looking to, you know, push Andrew Jackson off the 20. More about that later when we read the news. So the Valley Forge, the people have too much authority. Valley Forge, we can't trust them. You know, the British were always able to trade, you know, with American farmers in the area of Valley Forge because they paid in gold. And all Washington could offer was colonial funny money. And they didn't want that money. They're more than happy to trade with the Brits. And Hamilton, you see what I'm talking about? You know, that they're disloyal. You know, there's a future in rebellion. There's no future, at least a financial future, in remaining with Great Britain, but we can connect with their economy. What absolutely infuriated Washington. There was one episode, one incident at Valley Forge, there were many, where a General Mifflin went out to get supplies from the local farmers and paying in monopoly money. We have no gold. But here's an IOU from General Washington, and we'll make good on it when the war is over. So they picked up some barrels of flour to make fire cake. Now you can make fire cake for dinner tonight. It's very simple. Fire cake is flour and water. Then you form a little patty, and you put it in the oven for 30 minutes at 450, and it browns, and there's your dinner. It will fill you up. It doesn't satisfy all the food groups. It might also stop you up for a while, all right? But at least it's filling. So General Mifflin is buying barrels of flour and leaving these IOUs. So they bring this flour back to camp, they pry the top off it, and the first 2 inches of the barrel have flour. And the rest of the flour and the rest of the barrel is filled with sand. We've been duped. We've been tricked by these peasants and these peasants. And that's when Washington tells General Greene, you're my new quartermaster. You go out there and take it. Take what you need, and I'll deal with the consequences later. If this army is not fed, it's going to dissolve. And Hamilton knew all of that. Take it. Leave them the funny money, and we'll pay them later. And just tell them it's from me, and I'll make good on it later. This revolution is failing now. So when the revolution is over, Hamilton returns to New York, and he's gone through law school. He put himself through law school. I think he studied up on his own. It was like 6 months or 9 months. I don't have time to do all this detail work. I'm Alexander Hamilton. I'm smart. I can figure this out on my own. And he was a successful lawyer, and reasonable fees. And when the Articles of Confederation, which was the form of government, which snapped into place with the end of the Revolution in 1783, it's a states' rights document. The states have more authority, than a federal government. And we are not going to replace the American Revolution was about a distant and powerful parliament and king. And we're not going to replace that with a powerful government. The Articles of Confederation was a states' rights document. And if one reads the first paragraph, it calls for a perpetual union of states, not of a federal government, a perpetual union of states. And the only way to amend the language under the Articles, is that all 13 states had to agree. I mean, that's shooting yourself in the foot when everybody has to agree. It just doesn't work that way. One state can prevent the will of the 12 others. Hamilton knew that. And men of property, men of wealth, men of business, men of education. With the outbreak of Shays' Rebellion, and here we go again, and it's in Massachusetts again, where it all started. Here we go again. We need to gather quickly in Philadelphia, and we need to rewrite or to write a new system of government. And just to make this point, and I'll make it briefly, and I'm not going to get tied up in it, is that when the delegates gathered, and Hamilton was one of the delegates, when the delegates gathered at Philadelphia, their job, they were tasked with taking the Articles of Confederation and rewriting them, to strengthen them, to give them some taxing power, not to put them through the shredder. In fact, it was so confusing to the French, for example, who spoke for the United States of America? No one knew. And they were planning, the French were planning to send 13 ambassadors to the United States, one to each state, because there's no single voice there. And Hamilton, this is just the problem we've been having since Valley Forge and at the end of the Revolution. So when he went to Philadelphia, and he supported those, and Madison being one of them, to take the Articles, put them through the shredder, and write a whole new system of government, to start all over again, while there's time. We've won the war, but we're losing the peace, while there is time. And many delegates, so we don't have the authority to do that. Massachusetts sent 4 men to Philadelphia. 2 of them left. We don't have the authority to do that, to write a new system of government. We need to ask permission. Gentlemen, if you ask permission, it'll be no. Most people are no people. But that's not always true. If you ask permission, it will be no. Just do it. Stand your ground, square your shoulders, and make it happen. We may never have this chance again. And Madison was in complete agreement. At the end of the day, at the end of that summer in 1787, when it was time to sign the Constitution, the only man left at the table, the New York table, was Alexander Hamilton. They'd all gone back to New York. We're not supposed to do this. We're going to get in big trouble. We have no authority to do this. And Hamilton, to lead a riskless life is to die young. Be bold, be brave, strike now, and we'll sell it later. And Hamilton at that convention, then we're going to move to him as Secretary of the Treasury, that when they were talking about the details of the Constitution, and they were talking about the powers of the presidency, this is Hamilton. I recommend that the president, whomever it turns out to be, be appointed for life. Mr. Hamilton, sir, for life. That's monarchy. That's what we need. Tighten up. Everything is too loose. For life. Absolutely for life. And with all due respect to Dr. Franklin, sir, you tired old goat, that, you had the position that you wanted the people to elect the president. The people, those people out there, those people on the streets of Philadelphia, they know nothing. That the president be appointed for life. And since I have the floor, that when the president is appointed for life, that he appoint every state governor. Never mind these elections, appoint every state governor, top to bottom coordination. We need to get a country moving. And it's not moving now. It's stuck in inflation. It's stuck in states' rights. It's stuck in Shays' rebellion. And those rebellions are being modeled elsewhere. We are losing the peace. Different kind of guy, huh? Than we've met sometimes in our, 8th, 9th, 11th grade history. It's right here, though. Would never want to be on Mount Rushmore. He is buried today where he would always want to be and remains. He's buried at the foot of Wall Street. He was the nation's money guy. And I know that when the opening bell rings at 9:30, he kind of bestirs himself and picks up a copy of the Wall Street Journal. How we doing? How we doing? And when the closing bell rings at 4, he settles in for the rest of the night. And he always had a running feud. And you know this with Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr founded the Bank of Manhattan. Alexander Hamilton founded the Bank of New York, both of which are trading this morning on Wall Street. How's that for longevity? How's that for playing your cards right? And this Constitution? Well, let's get him into the president. Let's get him into the cabinet. When George Washington was elected by the clunky Electoral College, and I know we had that conversation, quite a while ago. And the way it works today is not the way that the framers intended it to work. But if I go down that road, I'll never get back off it. I'll be lost in the deserts of Texas. So the way it works today is not the way the framers intended. Today we have parties. Today we have tickets. Today we have conventions. They wanted no part of that. Absolutely no part of that. And anyone who raised their hand and said, choose me, that is not the guy you want. He wants power. He wants money. He wants recognition. He wants a chapter in a history book. The guy who says, please, not me, I'm busy, that's your guy. That's your guy. Not the guy who puts his hand up. They would not recognize Hamilton will be right at home today. He'd be the startup of a new capital company, a CEO. He'd get it up and running, pull out his profit, and then develop a new line, a new investment. That's Hamilton. He'd be right at home. Benjamin Franklin would be right at home. John Adams, if he landed at Logan, he'd get right back on the plane and fly back to the 18th century. And so would Thomas Jefferson. Franklin and Hamilton would be right at home today. And they'd be having their glass of Madeira. You know that. You know they would be. And more than one. It helps you to think. It clears your mind. It's like Listerine. Right? Right? It clears your mind. Right? You know what tastes like Listerine? Scotch. Single malt Scotch snaps your head back, doesn't it? And a good tight martini will snap your head back. Ooh, it focuses you. Ooh, what was that? I just focused, or I refocused. Never mind a nice whiskey sour or something, or a Tom Collins. Washington is sworn in, and he's sworn in April of 1789. So we have an anniversary day coming up in April. And Washington, that I am not a military leader. And he was sworn in, not in his uniform. He wanted no part of that. I'm retired. This is not I'm not a Napoleon. Well, there's no Napoleon yet. But I'm not a military leader. I'm a civilian. I've retired. He thought he retired for all time. And he purchased, I guess it was a mail order purchase, a three-piece brown suit from a textile mill in Hartford, Connecticut. And he showed up wearing a three-piece brown suit to be sworn in. No weapons, no military accoutrements. I'm a civilian in this civilian control of the military. We are not a monarchy. We are not a military state. This is a civilian government of we the people, a more perfect union. And Washington did not take a salary. It paid $25,000 at that time. He worked pro bono. And I need help here. I cannot do all of this by myself. And there was no language in the Constitution that provided for a cabinet. There was no language. But Washington, I need help. I need help at state. I'm going to ask Thomas Jefferson. I'm not an attorney. I need an attorney general. You know, so my good friend from Virginia, Ed Randolph. I need a Secretary of War. I am not running around with my military outfit on. And my good friend from Massachusetts, Knox, you know, General Knox, will be my Secretary of War. And I need a money man. I need a money man to straighten out the finances. We're broke. We owe money to France. We owe money to the Dutch. We owe money to the States. We owe money to those Americans who bought war bonds. And we have no money. And I need somebody to straighten this mess out. Get Hamilton on the line. Get Hamilton. Sir. Sir. I'm on my way. I'm packing. And actually, he didn't have to go too far because the first capital was in New York, wasn't it? And Hamilton was a New Yorker. He was bold, brash, and loud. He knew every head waiter. He knew nothing happened until 11 p.m. And when most people are going to bed, I'm going out for the night. You know, I know how to hail a cab. I know every waiter. I can get the best room in the restaurant without even a reservation. I'm Alexander Hamilton. I'm bold. I'm brash. I'll bet you, if we dig deep enough, that he wrote the lyrics for Frank Sinatra. New York, New York, the city that never sleeps. New York is his shtick. And absolutely, sir, reporting in the morning. And he was the nation's money man. And he drew up a number of plans to be able to stabilize the currency, you know, to be able to get back on good terms with Great Britain, to rejoin that global economy and pay back the British, not the British rather, pay back the French, the Dutch, and those good, solid American patriots that invested in the American Revolution. They took a chance on it. And they ponied up $5 or $10, whatever the war bond was. And we're going to pay them so that we can bind them to this new federal government. You know, our word is our financial bond. And we can tie the states to this new federal government and begin to deal with the problem of states' rights. Hamilton, you know, at one time the cabinet could sit at Dunkin' Donuts. All you need is 5 chairs. You've got the 4 cabinet slots, and you've got Washington. There were maybe a half a dozen people, you know, working for the Article 2 for the presidency. I tell you, there are millions, aren't there, when they're working. Hey, you know what was interesting? I didn't pick this up until a couple of weeks into the government shutdown. The Secret Service did not get paid. Holy smokes. Your job is to take a bullet from me, and you're not getting paid? You know, so when some guy comes up, he goes, excuse me, you got a clean shot right here. I'd pay those guys. I'd pay them out of my pocket. They're not getting paid to protect me? I'm not that good. I don't have that many lives. When the government was first formed, and the Continental Congress shut down, and it was gone fishing, out of work. And when they shut down and turned it over to the Articles, and now it's under the Constitution, that they recommended that we not pay back anybody, to turn the dial back to 0. And Hamilton said, you can't do that. If you do not pay your debt, we're not going to be able to get loans. We're not going to be able to secure any loans from the Bank of England, which is the mightiest financial institution on the globe. We can't walk on our debt. We need to pay it. I know it's easy to walk away from it. I always tell my students, get a credit card, $200 or $300, small, and use it a couple of times, and pay it off, and pay it off, and pay it off. You get a record, you get a little bit of a financial record. That's short money. If you can't pay that $200, your old man will cover you. That's what they do, right? That's why we're all ATM machines, aren't we? All of us are ATM machines. Your old man will cover you, and if you won't, your mother will. Your mother doesn't want you to go to jail, and neither do I. I do love you. I don't want you to go to jail either for $200. Will you cover me, Dr. Hylander? Well, I didn't say that. But you certainly don't want to go to the, to debtor's prison for $200. Hamilton, we got to pay this off. We have to pay this off. Now let's unroll the plans that the strategic thinking of Hamilton. It's found in the assumption plan. It's found in the funding plan. It's found in the report on manufacturing. And it's found in a report on a national bank. Hamilton was always thinking and always anticipating. Where do we go with this? Where do we go with this? The big picture here. He's the nation's money guy. He's the nation's financial guy. And Hamilton knew that he enjoyed the complete confidence of George Washington. As I'm making it stronger than it is, but in a sense, Hamilton was the son Washington never had. This Hamilton, my lad, my boy. And, to the point at the end of the American Revolution, toward the very end of the Revolution, the last major battle, the Battle of Yorktown, and Hamilton wanted a field command. I don't want to sit behind a desk for the whole war doing money. And this looks like this might be the last battle. I want to lead soldiers into combat at Yorktown. I want to be able to take one of those trenches at Yorktown. And Washington denied him, said, "No, Alex, no, I can't spare you." And Hamilton walked out on him. He walked out of the tent in a huff. He walked out on Washington. And Washington followed him out. Alex, please, can we talk about this? Walking out on George Washington? Alex, can we talk about this? I will give you a command to take the trenches, some of the trenches. Be careful. I need you. Be careful. And I am not going to... Can't you see him with that personality? I'm sitting here behind a desk, and all this good fighting is going on, and this is the last battle, I think. That's the way I read it. And I want to be part of those. I want to be part of those men that storm the trenches and defeat Cornwallis. Be careful, Alex. Be careful. There's no one like you. I can't spare you. And now we sector the Treasury. The assumption plan. The goal of the assumption plan is to tie the states to this new federal government. And the assumption plan, the states were broke. That this new federal government will assume the debts of the states. The states had taken out loans too during the American Revolution. Now, this is a bold plan. It's treacherous. It could backfire. That this brand new federal government will assume the debts of the states. We'll pay your debt. I'll pay your debt. How? I haven't figured that out yet. And we're also, the second part of that will be the funding plan. And the funding plan that we will fund we will fund the IOUs, we will fund the war bonds that you good citizens had taken out. We're not going to walk on them. And that's going to tie you to this new federal government, that we keep our word, we keep our financial word. So we're going to pay down the debt of the state. We're going to make sure that those who bought war bonds get paid. Now, some of those war bonds had been already purchased at 10 cents on the dollar by Sharpies, who simply went up to a farmer, who's in debt. We fell into a depression after the war, and said, this government's never going to make good on this. What are you holding? I'm holding a $20 bond. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 10 cents on the buck. At least you've got something, because right now it's a piece of paper, and it's going to remain a piece of paper. And Hamilton knew this was going on. It's called insider trading, because people knew that Hamilton was going to issue the funding plan. and he'll make good on it. So I pick up for $2 your $20 war bond, and you took a risk on that, and I'm taking a risk that this government will make good on it. Hamilton knew that was going on. Madison didn't like it at all. The original bondholder should get paid. They're in tough financial straits, and they're being taken in by these Sharpies, some of whom are your friends. And you know that, Mr. Hamilton. Indeed they are. Take a chance on me. I'm going to make good on this. And you know, the person who took the initial bond out didn't trust that this government would make good on it. They won't stay with the risk. I'm gonna make sure everybody, if they took another risk, I'm going to make good on it. If you're going to play with the big boys, you better play with the big boys. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You better be armed and dangerous. I'm paying these, and they're going to get paid, and you're not going to get paid. You sold it, and I know to whom you sold these bonds. Madison and Jefferson were furious. By now, Jefferson's back from France, obviously. He's Secretary of State. And Madison had a lot of clout. He had a lot of drag, a lot of juice. And so did Jefferson. And both of these men, Virginians, loathed New York. They loathed it. People are rude here. They push. They talk like that, they talk like all they do is make a sandwich. Pastrami sandwich. I can't get a cab here. I don't know how to order at a restaurant. I miss Virginia. It's quiet in Virginia, and it snows here too often, and the rents are too high, and everything's expensive. Hamilton knew that. So when Jefferson and Madison made trouble on the funding plan and also on the assumption plan, that we have to work out a formula whereby the initial holder of the bond gets most of his money back, even though he lost it to a speculator. That's the right thing to do. And it's called the dinner. There's a dinner. And Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison have a dinner. It's not in a restaurant where everybody sees them. A little bit of collusion, a dinner, and we're going to make sure the conversation flows nicely. There's plenty of Madeira, and we're going to have a dinner. I need your help, Mr. Jefferson, Mr. Madison. I need your help. You control votes, and for the good of the country, hear me out. I've got something to offer you. You can make this happen. You've got enough votes to make this happen. The assumption, and more importantly, the funding plan. Here's what I propose. The old man loves me, Washington. He loves me. And I'm going to trade on that love. I'm going to trade on that affection. Here's what I propose. You help me pull the votes together for the assumption and funding plan, and I'll work on the old man. I know you hate New York, and I'll explain to him we need to move the capital to Washington. And gentlemen, you'll be at home, and you no longer need to hear that buzz of New York, that slow drawl of Virginia. And we're going to move it. I can't move it right away. We're going to move it to Philadelphia and then to Virginia. You're going to be right at home. Y'all are going to know everybody. It's going to be wonderful. And Secretary Jefferson, I know how much you miss Sally. Dusty Sally, right? Dusty Sally. I know how much you miss her. And you can slip home at lunchtime. Need I say more, Mr. Jefferson? You can take a half a day. Some things never change. And Madison, I know that you're newly married, and Dolly Madison, and I know that my good friend, I think my good friend, he used to be, Aaron Burr, made that connection. He made those introductions, didn't he? I was at that dinner party, and you're so bashful, Madison, and you always wear that black suit like you're about to be buried, and you have that sallow complexion, and you were interested in her. I know, I was watching that, and you went to the right guy. I know Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr knows every woman in town. He's catnip too. He's got deep pockets, good-looking guy, well-spoken, travels. Would you like to go skiing with me? Would you like to go scuba diving? Some things never change. And you can slip home. You'll be close to where you live. Now, I'll do that for you. And I'll work the old man. I'll do it for you if you pull some votes for me, and the deal is done. Now, what's Madison also thinking? What's Hamilton also thinking? See, the French Revolution is up and about. And the French Revolution had turned so bloody. And Hamilton, the reason, the people were able to grab the king and queen and put them in prison because they were only a few miles outside of Paris. And then they stormed the Bastille and took the weapons. So you can't trust the people. But, and he's thinking, if I put the capital in a swamp, and it was, Washington, D.C. was an absolute swamp. It was unhealthy. Abigail and John, the first presidential couple, to live in the unfinished White House, for Abigail, it absolutely disturbed her. You think, oh, you got a frog in your living room. I mean, there were snakes everywhere. Snakes curled up on the couch, on a chair. Snakes in your hat. Snakes in your boots. Snakes everywhere. And back then they had the canopy. Today it's romantic. You got the four-post with the canopy. The snakes would crawl up on there. And you're sleeping and down they come. John, there's a snake in the bed. Stop calling me names. No, I mean it. There's a snake in the bed. I will insulate the capital from the people. See, none of that gets in the history books, does it? That's why kids hate history. But when you do it that way, and you put a real spin on it, so it gets passed. It gets passed. And Washington is persuaded to move the capital. And we're going to name it after you, sir. Washington. You are immortal. And also, as Secretary of the Treasury, I think I can put you on the $1 bill. I'm on the 10, you're on the 1. Bingo. Bingo. Now, funding plan, assumption plan. How are we going to pay for this? And this is going to lead to a long and bitter struggle between Hamilton and Jefferson. That will never heal. Hamilton had a vision of the country, and Hamilton's vision looks more like 2019 than Jefferson's. Hamilton, we need to industrialize. We need steel. He never said that. But we need to industrialize. We need factories. We need textile mills. We need to industrialize. We need to bark with the big dogs and raise money and have a commercial nation. And we're going to be able to make money, and I can pay all this debt off by making money. We need an industrial nation. And we need tanneries and textile mills and so forth. And Thomas Jefferson did not see it that way at all. Thomas Jefferson, that we need to remain an agricultural nation. That leave the factories and leave the mines and leave the tanneries and leave the poisoned air of Europe to hang over Birmingham or Liverpool. Will it cost us a few extra bucks for imports? You bet. We need to keep the country pristine so that every American can take a tin cup and dip it into a river, dip it into a lake, and clear, cool water. We need to remain agricultural. Let the Industrial Revolution destroy Europe. We need a nation of yeoman farmers. And Hamilton, we don't need farmers. We have too many farmers. We need business. These farmers think it's a great day, it's fun to get up at daybreak and go down to the chicken coop and take a bet on how many eggs Clara laid. Wow, that's not my idea of a good time. Jefferson, do you think it's an accident that the Lord placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? The Lord's a farmer. He harvests souls and corn. That's why Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. Can't you see Hamilton saying, how am I going to deal with this lunatic? Adam and Eve born in the garden. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The Lord's a farmer. So we have this big battle, and the other battle is how to read properly the Constitution. Loose construction or strict construction? Does the Constitution have implied powers or just express powers? Hamilton, implied powers. And we can draw guidance from the language and make the words say things that really need to be said. And Jefferson, if you begin tampering with the Constitution, you're going to have big trouble. It is expressed powers. We can only do what we can do, and not to read into the Constitution. Sounds like a present battle on the Supreme Court from time to time, doesn't it? Strict construction and loose construction. It's been going on since time out of mind. And Hamilton has proposed, with his manufacturing plan, actually two of them, a national bank and a manufacturing plan. The manufacturing plan is we industrialize. We industrialize and we industrialize. And we have a tariff so that the Brits do not dump their goods on our shore, because they've industrialized a century ago and they've got all the details down. They're running in the black repeatedly. So we need to have tariffs to compel people to buy American and keep the foreigners out. And that way we can begin to develop and make money to pay down state debt and individual debt. The report on manufacturing. And to do the business of the country, we need a bank. A bank. And this is where that cabinet meeting exploded. A bank. There's no language in the Constitution for a bank. That is the epiphany of loose construction. When you start playing fast and loose with the Constitution today, it's a prescription for disaster. There is no language for a bank. And Washington is listening to this. And Jefferson gets over it. He's made his point. We cannot do what the Constitution does not permit. That there are many, many state banks. And this government, Mr. Hamilton, sir, and this government can do its business through state banks. You have a Bank of New York. You have a Bank of Manhattan. There's a Bank of Philadelphia. We can do business through state banks. And Hamilton, no, we can't. Too much paperwork. It's too sloppy. I want a national bank. I want a checkbook that says National Bank, United States Treasury. First check, 0001. And on the background is the Potomac. And there's my name to be signed, Alexander Hamilton. Oh, I can see it. I can envision it. Can't you, Mr. Jefferson? No, I can't. I can't. It's a hellish idea. Now, Washington, will you please, both of you men, write up your points of view? And for Hamilton, there's language for implied powers. And it is and Hamilton's got the Constitution. You know where it is, don't you? Hamilton's got the Constitution, and he makes the point, sir, Your Excellency. Washington liked Your Excellency. I like being addressed as Your Excellency, but nobody does. It's "Gah, hey you." I like being addressed as Your Excellency. Even my children wouldn't do it. I thought it'd be fun. Your Excellency. Nobody bid on that. Your Excellency. You were at Philadelphia. You know there were certain understandings. They may have not been written down, but there are certain understandings, kind of a wink or a nod. It's like when you say, I do. There's more to I do than I do. I do what? Well, you do. We'll talk about it later. You were not, Mr. Jefferson, all due respect, Mr. Jefferson, I know you're a lady, okay? All due respect, Mr. Jefferson, you weren't there. Whatever you were doing in Paris, we don't need to know that. But you weren't there. Your Excellency, you were there. I was there. We were both privy to the conversations, both open and around the bar. And we know a wink and a nod, and not everything had to be said. You know that, sir. And there is language here that implies a bank. And Hamilton, I can see him, can't you? Opening up the Constitution and going to a few clauses that read that we have the right to coin money, we have the right to establish its value, that we have the right to provide for an army and a navy, that we have the right to do infrastructure work to clean up harbors, roads, and canals. And I submit, sir, that if we have the authority to coin money and regulate its value and to punish counterfeiting, it's implied How can we coin money without a federal bank and designate its value? It's implied, sir. And then the absolute bombshell. These guys at Philadelphia, they fought, they argued, and the first debates were not so much over slavery. It was on the size of the government and the financial direction of the government. And at the very end, when the delegates of Philadelphia listed, and they did, and you can check me on this, drag out your Constitution. I know you have one in the glove box of your car. I know you do. Yeah. Don't disappoint me. I know you do. I know you do. You have to. I'm going to revoke your citizenship. You have to have that with you. And Article 1, the first section of Article 1, listing the powers of the legislature, they listed them. They expressed them. Boom, 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 which I've just done for you. Coin money, regulate its value, and so forth. And at the very end of that section, what a brilliant act of anticipation. You ready for this? And Hamilton nailed it. He hit a grand slam. He nailed it. Sir, this is the language, sir, you were there. That Congress may do whatever is, and here's the quote, necessary and proper to carry out the above expressed powers. And I submit to you, sir, that if we can coin money, regulate its value, pay the nation's bills, have an army and a navy, and have infrastructure repairs, I think it is necessary and proper that we have a bank to be able to do the above responsibilities and not fritter away our time and fritter away my time working through 4 or 5 state banks. It won't work. It's sloppy. It's like when you have 3 or 4 checking accounts. It doesn't work. I tried it once. When the kids are in college, try to keep the money separate. You can't. The most you can handle is 2. You have one. Are you married? And your wife has one. That's all. And you both should have separate checking accounts. Your wife has one, and you have one. Bingo. Those you have separate accounts. That way you keep things straight, right? You got your street money. I call it street money. Guys got to have street money all the time, and not have to account for it. That's street money. That's how you do business. That's how you do business. That's how I do business. I used to do business that way. Now I only have one account. Maybe that's why I only have one account. It's okay. It's okay. So Hamilton, it's a win-win-win for Hamilton. And when Washington retires in 1796, they wanted him to run for yet another term, or to stand for another term, I'm going home. And he had asked Madison initially to write his farewell address. But politics got to be desperate. Politics got to be tough. And he asked Hamilton, because I know you're done, to write my farewell address. And Hamilton did. So when you read Washington's farewell address, it is Hamilton, avoid political parties, trade with all of Europe, avoid sectionalism, and the future of the country, we need to head west, and we need to develop the West. We need textile mills and mines and iron ore development and so forth. Hamilton, a man of his present and the man of the future. And just like Benjamin Franklin. So before we retreat, are you retreating? Okay, before we retreat, and I know you're going to read your Constitution at the next red light. Thank you. It's always good to agree, isn't it? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I sleep better knowing that you've agreed. And a question and observation? Anything, a question and observation? Let me leave you with a quick joke. Go ahead, sir.
Who thought up the electoral college?
See, that comes from the Constitutional Convention. But oh yeah, he supported it because the people don't vote for it. I mean, the way it was designed. Oh no. The electors are off there by themselves in their own separate room.
And you didn't talk about Hamilton's wife and children.
He had a wife. He had many girlfriends. Yes. All right. He had several children, and so did Benjamin Franklin. Yeah. Not John Adams. John Adams was so straight. He was so straight. He would not let you. I know John Adams would never let you copy his homework. You know that. You know that. And Hamilton would say, what homework? I got it all done in my head. I did it in my head on the way in on the bus. Tell you a quick joke. Hamilton, Franklin, I haven't told this in years. I got to say, bear with me. Hamilton, Franklin, and John Adams. And since the baseball season is about to start, let's pretend Hamilton, John Adams, and Franklin are at the 7th game of the World Series. Okay? The Red Sox are going back. And the Lord has come down because he's a Red Sox fan. And he's got the whole row behind the Red Sox dugout. And the Lord's there, and he's got his jersey on, he's got his Coke and his hot dog and his pennant, and he's got the whole row to himself. He said, I'd like a little company. I'm going to invite back the Boston boys, And to his left, there's Benjamin Franklin, and to his right, there's John Hancock, and behind him is John Adams. And the Lord looks at Benjamin Franklin. He said, what do you believe in, sir? What do you believe in, Dr. Franklin? He said, I believe that an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's what he said. He said, excellent, excellent advice. Good thinking, Dr. Franklin. Please sit to my left. And John Hancock. What do you think? What's your advice? John Hancock? I think we should continue always to live by the phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Excellent, excellent. Mr. Hancock, I know that you chaired, that Constitutional Convention, the Declaration of Independence. Please sit to my right. Mr. Adams, sir, good to see you. Mr. Adams, what do you believe in, sir? And he paused, and Adams said, I believe you're sitting in my seat. That's John Adams, isn't it? That's John Adams. I'll see you later. Be well. Sure, question, what?
Now on Broadway, there's this Hamilton play.
Yeah.
Is there any historical play?
Oh, sure. The Hamilton play, sure. Yeah. I mean, nobody can understand anything. It's all rap music. So you have to look at the lyrics. But the fellow who was playing Hamilton, Miranda, all right, his last performance, the best seat in the house, the cheapest seat in the house was $2,000. And I'll bet that was in New Jersey. You had to sit in New Jersey. It's just like the cheapest seat at the bowl game, the super boring game, was $3,000. I'll see you all later. Be well. Thank you for your company. And you got your $10 bill. Checkbook. I know it's true. I know you have your own checkbook because you're a guy. I know you do.